Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me for today's stream. This is a new format for us, so hoping that everything goes well. So thanks for coming to the first one. Um, my name is Laura. I work at Prefect, and what I want to show you today is part of what's been kind of a big announcement for this week about our new open sourced version of our cloud UI and state management database that you can now get as a part of Prefect Core. Um, so just to kind of go over a little bit what we're talking about today, I'm going to give a little installation walkthrough for anybody who maybe hasn't played with the new Prefect Core server yet. Talk a little bit about that. Do a little bit of a architecture debrief of what these new services are that are packaged inside Prefect Core that you can now use to run this orchestration layer. I'm going to do a demo of running a flow from core server, so you'll be able to see what your sort of local environment should look like. And then for anybody who is interested in cloud or coming from cloud or just into cloud, I will talk about configuring between core server and Prefect Cloud. So we have a nice way to toggle between them. So I'll showcase that too. And then hopefully we'll have time also for me to talk about developing on the core server a little bit. So part of the nice thing about making this open source, more people can play with it, but also more people can contribute into it. So want to give a little bit of information about how to even do that. That's the plan. So let's make my desktop show up here, make me small, so that I can get to the beginning of it. So here I have my terminal window here. I am in a Conda environment where I have Prefect version 0.10.0 installed. So this is the version, we can give it a look, that here I have version 0.10.0 installed. So this is the version, the lowest version that you would need. It's the current version right now, though we'll be releasing some more in the coming days that has Prefect Server in it. So first up, you're going to need to do your Conda install or your pip install, upgrade, whatever it is that you did to install Prefect in the first place, or if you're a new user for the first time, and get this version. So once we've got that, the next step is going to be to run this command, prefect backend server. So especially later when I talk about configuring between server and cloud, this will come up again. This is how we tell your prefect installation whenever an agent is running, which we'll talk about later, or whenever a flow is running, what backend it should be looking at. If you're a cloud user, if it should be looking at cloud, or if you're just a core user, if it should be looking at the new server. So that's what Prefect Backend Server is going to do. So if I run this, you'll see it gives me a little thing that says backend switch to server. So now we're in a good configuration state where I can actually start the Prefect server. So I'll go ahead and do that with our one and done command here of Prefect server start. So I'll press enter here and you'll see this is some output for people who use Docker. This is some Docker Compose output pulling the images from Docker Hub for some of the services that this uses, and then actually starting them. So tons of output going on here as everything gets run up. Eventually you're gonna see it slow down and see about the server being ready. And if I come over here to my Chrome browser, I have localhost port 8080 in here. That is where it runs by default. And you'll see that I have a local UI here. And again, for the cloud users, this should look really familiar. It's very similar to the Prefect Cloud product. But this is one totally just running on your own local machine. And in fact, I'll go click on this hamburger menu and you'll see down here, there's like the core logo with Prefect Server Development listed. So this is our server up and running. I want to do, before we mess too much with the server itself, I'm going to go on a little tangent here about the architecture of all these services that we're now running on your machine with Docker here. So let's make this a little bit bigger so everybody can see what's up. So here's the Docker Compose file that fundamentally is what Prefect Server Start is going to be executing for you. So just to walk a little bit through all these services. So right here, whoops, we have a Postgres service. So this is a Postgres, that's the normal Postgres version 11 image from Docker Hub. It does a little bit of setup here on your behalf. This is going to be the database that actually has the states of your flows, et cetera, maintained. And this is kind of like the meat and potatoes here of what the UI is actually rendering for you, the situation that's stored inside your Postgres database. But to actually access all of the tables and rows in your Postgres database, we have a GraphQL API layer. So there's kind of three parts to that, really. We have the GraphQL service itself. We have this Hasura service, which is along with this service down here called Apollo, two pieces that make kind of interacting with the GraphQL service nicer. So those are kind of all a little bit in a package together in terms of that they're all helping you access, or this code access, the API endpoints to get through to the database. And then we've got two other services in here. We have the scheduler. So maybe you'll be able to see some of the code later, but this is the service that loops and determines if if your installation should be running flows that have a schedule. So that's the purpose of the scheduler. It's going to keep setting stuff into a scheduled state if necessary. And then down here is the actual UI container. So the UI container is what's actually rendering this UI that we see over here. Again, maybe we'll get some time to do a little deep dive in that and about it from a development perspective later. But those are basically the important services. So definitely should be up and Atom. There has been some people who want to configure some of these ports differently. So there is some work coming out very shortly about that in the next patch release. But right here, this is the Docker compose file that I'm running right now. So let's maybe look at the UI just a little bit more. Again, for cloud folks, this is going to be very familiar. There's this overview tab, and then there's also this flows tab, which right now I have an empty database, so I don't have anything in here at all. Let's run some stuff and get to see some of the UI in action, actually. And to do that, I'm actually going to switch over to another terminal window where I'm actually going to show you all the flow that I am going to run for us. So I have a little flow in here called Hello World. Has a couple things in it pulled from some of the tutorials you may have seen for Prefect Core before. The interesting part, besides establishing all of these tasks, setting up a flow that uses those tasks, the important thing that we're going to need to do to get this flow to be run by our orchestration layer of Prefect Core's server is this flow.register call. So again, cloud people are going to be really used to this. This flow.register method call is going to build a serialized artifact of the flow and submit that to the GraphQL API so that it knows what that this could be scheduled and what that means. And there's a couple ways that you can configure this further, but we're going to use kind of like the basic flow.register. So if I run this Python file, then here line 43 is going to execute, and then we're going to have this flow that's described in this file registered to my local server. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to run Python hello world.py. Again, this is going to run everything in this file, including our magic line here, line 43 of flow.register. So if I press enter, we'll see that we get some output here. The exciting part here is that it gives us a link to our new flow that has been registered with server, and we can kind of see that that's true because this is where our server hostname is. And if I come over here to the UI and give it a refresh, you'll see that now there's a flow listed in this UI called My First Flow. I can make this a little bit bigger too, not too big. And if I click in on here, now we have this flow view, which shows us a couple nice things, and we'll kind of look through all of them later as well. Mostly, I want to highlight the schematic, which we'll be able to watch the live updating schematic shortly, and this run button. So the nice thing here about this UI is now we have a great, big old run button that we can press to actually start a flow run. So to actually have our flow execute, and again, this is going to be not news to the cloud people, but might be news to people who haven't used cloud before, and so server is their first case of using our orchestration layer, is that even though all these services that we started with Prefect Server Start have set up the orchestration layer, you need an agent process running that actually is going to kick off the actual work on wherever that work exists. So part of the benefit of this architecture is that if you are using cloud, your actual code runs on your infrastructure and cloud can run elsewhere. So that's one nice thing that this architecture allows and is part of where it came from cloud. But that would be kind of new to people who haven't, who are just from core. So we're going to set it up over here. So let me get some more space on my terminal so that I can start an agent. So for people who are working with core server, it's just prefect agent start. This is going to start the local agent here that is connected to the state database and GraphQL through the GraphQL API that was started from our server orchestration layer. So again, this is a process that kind of waits and for directions from either the scheduler service or from me pressing this run button, which is what I'm going to show you now. So if I press here, I can click my run button and we'll start to see some output over here from my Prefect agent. And we'll also get to see some live updating changes in the UI for the schematic. So you can see we're starting to get some information from the agent process. In the live schematic and in the Gantt chart is another nice way to visualize this. You can see that you can see it's updating now really fast. These 3 tasks at the end are really short, but I threw some sleeps in here so we could watch it change. And then we can come back here to our schematic and see the final state. So this is one of the most requested things that core users wanted to be able to see, this live updating visualization. Certainly a lot of people may have used flow.visualize before to see what a flow looked like before or after being run, but this gives us the ability to watch it actually be run. So that's the most awesome thing about it. We can also come here and see the logs that got sent that are visible through our UI. So this is another nice feature. And this is just one hello world flow, but you can imagine there's plenty of flows in here that you might be orchestrating, kicking off. Either they have a schedule, so the scheduler service runs them automatically, or you ad hoc kick them off using the flow run button in the UI. So that's the basic demo about how server works and how to get all the pieces together. I want to talk now about how to flip configure between core, server, and cloud. So I'm going to stop my agent here really quick, and I'm going to show you my other tab, which I have here. Yes, I hid cloud behind my terminal. So here I have a browser opened up at cloud.prefect.io. So this is the cloud UI, the cloud product. So you can sign up for a free scheduler tier account. There we go, account here. Cloud has a couple more features, and also you don't have to run it locally. So let me show you how to switch between them if you are a cloud user. So basically, to flip, what we're going to run here is just going to be prefect backend cloud. So earlier we ran prefect backend server to configure ourselves for server, and now instead I'm doing prefect backend cloud. So if I press enter here, you'll see it warns me, tells me, congratulates me for switching my backend to cloud. And then a lot of the process is the same after that, especially for people who've already authenticated to cloud before, who are cloud users from before. So in this case, we can start up our flow registration again. So here I have my hello world.py. Remember how we executed this under the server configuration so that our flow would be registered on server? So what I'm going to do now is execute this again, but now because I've used Prefect backend cloud to flip my configuration, this is going to register this flow on cloud instead. So same idea as before. I'm going to run Python hello world. And you'll see that now this output, I can kind of see that I was configured to look at cloud because the output of the registration execution is with this hostname cloud.prefect.io. So if I run over to my flows tab, you'll see that now this flow is registered in cloud. And I can, do the same good stuff in here. I can check out the schematic. And if I start up an agent that is authenticated to cloud on this side and then press run, then I can, do kind of the same type of thing. So to actually start my Prefect agent, I actually need to, in the case of cloud, start my agent with an authorization token that you get from the cloud UI. And this is how this agent can authenticate to this team in cloud. And if I hit my run button again, just so we can see it all together, come over to my schematic, then you'll see a couple logs coming out here as my agent picks up that I have pressed the run button in the UI, that I want a flow to be run over here on by my local agent. And we can watch the schematic update, update live here. See that thing's flowing, and check out the Gantt chart, same nice goodness on the server side and on the cloud side. There's certainly a couple, differences. We talked a little bit in a Q&A earlier this week about them as well. For example, in cloud, you can, let's jump over here really quick. You can see which agents are running and connected right from this view, but that's not something that's in Prefect Core server, for example. So a couple small things, but in general, the idea is that a lot of it is the same, especially in terms of wanting to actively monitor and see your flows, see that schematic, make sure that everything's running, kick things off from the UI. All of that is packaged up in Prefect server so that you can, easily do that. Okay, so what I want to show next is on the topic of contributing, right? So let me unhook from cloud. So clear that out. I'm going to change to Prefect backend server so that I'm no longer pointing at cloud, but I'm pointing at my local running server. So again, I had over here this task run that I just ran with you all for this flow called my first flow. You can see it says when flow runs over here. So if you want to be developing on Prefect server, what you may want to take a look at over here is inside this server folder. Let me jump out actually to here. We are at just the normal Prefect Core repo. All the good stuff about server is in here in server. And if we click in here, you'll see that there's a ton of stuff. And the important things I want to point out to you is that Docker file I showed you earlier is right here in docker compose.yaml. Then there is also some stuff in here in the services directory for what the Apollo server does. So if you wanted to be contributing and you need to do something in the Apollo server, this is where the source code for that is. So there's some information here about how to do the development, how the linting works, etc. But that's how you get to the details for that service. For UI, if you're interested in contributing to the UI, that is in here. So this is where the open source UI source code is. This is a Vue.js project. So if you do or don't have experience with Vue, that is what you will be contributing with. But there's some information here about how to get everything installed for development, some tips on some plugins that you need to have installed, and how to actually run the tests for the UI as well, and how to lint and compile your SCSS. So that's what's located in here. We've also got some basic configuration for the Hasura service, though we more or less are using that as is. And then if I jump out here back to server, but go into source/prefect server, you'll see that there's also a place called services in here, a directory called services in here. And this is where the source code for the scheduler is at. So the scheduler itself is more or less this scheduler.py. It's this loop service, which is also included in this repository to hit the endpoints necessary to schedule a flow run if there is a flow in through the API layer that needs to be run on a schedule. So that's what the scheduler service is about, and here's kind of the meat of where that code actually exists in here. Okay, so that's where all these pieces more or less are. If I back up a little bit to this server directory, there is some development directions of how to set yourself up to develop across all of this. And kind of the basic important thing here is that you'll want to install from the server, and on top of your Prefect install, you'll want to install from the server directory, and this will give you access to this prefect-server command and its subcommands. And there's a whole bunch of kind of like different pieces of how you could stand up different parts of the infrastructure using this prefect server CLI that are described here. And I think the one that I really want to show you is going to be prefect server database reset -yes. So over here, again, I've got my local development environment, or rather my local UI, which is running. And I had, done some tests, run a test flow just earlier in this stream. And if I come over here and press enter on this, it's going to actually clear my local database, reset it, and we'll see that all of our UI updates, that everything goes away, that give it a little refresh here, that there's no flows anymore. And this is because I've cleared the metadata database here. So, this would be really useful for people when you're doing local development, kicking off different types of flows, and you want to try some stuff out on a fresh install. So that's just, a taste of what is going on inside this prefect server subcommand. And if you are interested in contributing, you'll probably want to follow those directions here to get everything installed for development. So I think that is everything that I wanted to show you today. So hopefully you all enjoyed this stream. It gave you hopefully it gave you a good jump into how this all works and how to develop on it too. We're really interested to see if contributors want to get involved with the open source side of the orchestration layer. And hopefully this also elucidates a little bit for the cloud users or prospective cloud users how to do that configuration switch easily. So other than that, hoping to have some more live streams in the future. If you haven't joined the Slack yet, definitely join the community Slack. So thanks again for stopping by, and I will see you next time.